Thanks for tuning into the latest edition of the CDA Institute's Expert Series. For this installment, we spoke with Laurie Idlout, Member of Parliament for the riding of Nunavut, about the impacts of climate change on Arctic and Northern Indigenous communities, reconciling different conceptions of security in the Arctic, the need for more investment in infrastructure in northern communities, how Inuit voices can be better represented in Canadian policymaking, and the role of Arctic and Northern Indigenous communities when it comes to Canadian defence and security. MP Idlout, thank you so much for joining the CDA Institute today. It's a tremendous honor to host you and have the chance to speak with you. To start off this conversation, I'd like to ask, how do Northern Indigenous communities in the Arctic conceive of Arctic security? What does security look like to them? And how might the Canadian state and Northern Indigenous peoples reconcile different conceptions of security as they work together to address various challenges in the Arctic?
Northern communities, when I've spoken with my constituents, believe that Arctic security is very important, especially since Canada used the Arctic to discuss or secure sovereignty. I think that my constituents have definitely felt they've been ignored as possible key decision makers when it comes to how security could look like in the North. And there have been ideas that have been shared with me about how improvements can be made. The most biggest idea that is shared with me all the time is that there needs to be more investments in the people that live in the Arctic, as well as the infrastructure to support the people that live in the Arctic. Because if we are to be fully engaged in keeping the Arctic secure, we need improvements to be seen in investments. We've seen too many gaps for too many decades, not enough investments in housing, not enough investments in ensuring that the people that I represent are able to keep the Arctic secure. I've had many residents come back to me saying that they've seen traffic in their waters that they've had to report that are not being seen because there's not presence from other people. So needing to make sure that there's better investments with the Canadian Rangers, with the search and rescue teams, and people that are experts on our lands in the Arctic needs to be improved as well. Inuit are very proud to be Canadian Rangers because they know that they are contributing to the security of Canada. But Canadian Rangers do not get the same investments that are put into military. For example, they have to rent their own equipment. And when they rent their own equipment, the cost of that rental is not up to par with the increasing cost of living. So if a Canadian Ranger who is a volunteer has used their snowmobile, for example, they have to take care of the cost of when there's been damage. And it's quite difficult to do repairs when there are no regular repair shops, when it's very difficult to order parts to repair snowmobiles. So there needs definitely to be improvements in how Canadian Rangers can do their part by ensuring that they have the capital they need to keep the Arctic secure.
How do inhabitants of the Arctic feel about further development of the Arctic that will occur as a result of climate change and opening sea lanes? Do you think that there's optimism about how such development could impact local communities? Are there maybe concerns that it could disrupt culture or way of life?
There is no one single view. There are different views for sure. I am intimately aware of what's going on with the Mary River project, for example, that is operated by the Baffinland Iron Mines Corporation, and the impacts that that project is having on the most impacted communities, for example, like Pond Inlet, Arctic Bay, Igloolik, Sanirayak, and Clyde River. They've already experienced a lot of damages. They've already experienced changes to the environment as well as wildlife behavior that's impacting their ability to rely on the food, the subsistence living. And there's a lot of opposition to the expansion of the proposal made by Baffinland. At the same time, I'm hearing from my constituents that there are no other places to be gainfully employed, so they appreciate the project because there's no other place to work. So these are the two competing views that tend to happen, is either be able to work or protect the environment. And it's such an unfortunate dichotomy that we have to live with at this point in the state of our world, when climate change is so obvious in all parts of the globe. I've had elders tell me the changes that they've seen in their lifetime, the changes to the conditions of the snow, the changes in the atmosphere. They've seen all these changes that is making the environment around them more unpredictable. It impacts their ability to teach their grandchildren about the conditions of snow, of the conditions of the ice, because there are so many changes going on. So it really is very much both cultural, physical, and also an impact on our ability to hunt and harvest on a diet that we've relied on for generations. It's so unfortunate that all these changes are not being better protected. And I hope that with my work at Parliament, that I'll be able to try and make some changes that will better protect and benefit my constituents in Nunavut.
How do Northern MPs and leaders, including yourself, feel about the prospect of increased military presence in the Arctic to protect the region's sovereignty? Could it provide much needed infrastructure to the region?
It forces me to be hopeful because having that increase could contribute to our economy. It could increase the understanding of the conditions that we live in. I think that the military's presence could be great. They can become great ambassadors for Inuit, for people that live in Nunavut, to make sure that more Canadians realize just how unique and expert Nunavut are about the Arctic, and why there needs to be an equal relationship between the military and the Indigenous peoples, and not have the military just jump in with their own processes and making decisions separate and apart from Indigenous peoples whose lives are being protected. So it really has to be a respectful relationship that allows both peoples to protect the Arctic in a way that fosters positive relationships.
How do Northern MPs, leaders, and Indigenous communities perceive the potential challenges posed by Russia and China in the region, particularly following the war in Ukraine, and considering how contested and competitive the region will become as climate change facilitates easier access to the Arctic?
The discussions that I've heard to date is the more imminent threat to the Arctic is climate change. Russia's invasion on the Ukraine and its potential to expand to the Arctic does not feel as imminent, is what I hear from my residents. They hope that given all the changes that we're being forced to experience, those are the reasons that people are hopeful that investments will increase towards the people that live there, as well as the infrastructure that they live in. Iqaluit has been in boil water advisories because of the poor infrastructure. Rankin Inlet is not able to expand because of the shortage of water and the lack of access to water that is all around them because federal investments aren't coming in. So I think that the forefront of people's minds are the need to invest in the people, so that it's the people that can be part of keeping the Arctic secure against threats like what's going on with Vladimir Putin and what he's trying to do to and what he's done, for example, in the Ukraine. I think I just want to make sure that I bring home the point that Indigenous peoples and people who have lived in the Arctic for generations know the lands, know the Arctic, and because of their expert knowledge, they should be relied upon when it comes to how to keep it secure and how to make sure that we're able to deal with threats that might come our way. So keeping us engaged and informed and part of the decision making will be the best way to keep the Arctic secure.